$12. That's what a seat to watch the most talked about player in women's basketball history was going for on resale markets this season. Not the nosebleeds at a preseason game. A regular season Indiana Fever home game. Caitlin Clark on the floor. $12. Let that land for a second. Because 14 months ago, those same seats were flipping for $200. Upper deck tickets, the ones usually reserved for diehards and last-minute buyers, were selling out before casual fans even opened the app. StubHub was treating Fever games like playoff events. The resale economy around one player, one rookie, had rewritten what a WNBA ticket was even worth. So here's the question that nobody in the mainstream sports conversation wants to ask directly. What happened? Not what happened to Caitlin Clark. She's still producing. Her numbers are still elite. Her shooting range still forces defenses into decisions they're not built to handle. If you watch her play, you already know she belongs in any conversation about the most dangerous offensive players in the game today. Full stop. What happened to everything around her? Because here's the dual reality that should stop you cold. The Indiana Fever are still one of the most talked about franchises in women's sports. Caitlin Clark is still the single biggest individual draw the WNBA has ever seen. And yet, empty rows are visible on broadcast cameras. Resale prices are cratered. And fans who drove hours to see her last year are quietly doing different math this year. That contradiction is an accident. It's a signal. And signals, when you ignore them long enough, become sirens. The empty seats aren't the story. They never were. They're the symptom. The real story is buried inside the roster decisions, the organizational priorities, and the gap between what Indiana promised Caitlin Clark's arrival would build and what they actually built around her. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why those seats are empty. And more importantly, you'll understand why it has nothing to do with fan loyalty, nothing to do with Clark's performance, and everything to do with a front office that may have mistaken a rising tide for their own shipbuilding. Before we get there, though, drop your answer in the comments right now. Do you think the Indiana Fever's front office has done enough to build around Caitlin Clark? Yes or no? I want to see where this audience stands before we lay out what the numbers actually say. Because what the numbers say is going to make some of you very uncomfortable. The surge was real. Historically, undeniably, jaw-droppingly real. And understanding just how explosive it was is the only way to understand how significant the drop actually is. Picture this. A middle-aged woman from Columbus, Ohio, never watched a full WNBA game in her life. Sets an alarm for 6 a.m. to buy tickets before they sell out. She's not a basketball fan. She's barely a sports fan. But she'd watch Caitlin Clark drain a half-court shot in a March Madness clip on her phone. Sent it to her daughter, and 48 hours later, they were booking a hotel in Indianapolis. That story isn't unique. It happened thousands of times over. And that's the part the attendance numbers alone can't fully capture. The 2024 Indiana Fever season didn't just draw bigger crowds. It drew entirely new crowds. People who had never considered a WNBA game as a destination were suddenly treating it like a bucket list event. That's not growth. That's conversion. And conversion at that scale is something the league hadn't seen since its founding days. The raw numbers were staggering. Indiana averaged over 17,000 fans per game during Clark's rookie season, a figure that doesn't just lead the league, it obliterates the historical context of what WNBA attendance had looked like for the decade prior. Road games weren't safe from the surge either. When the Fever traveled, opposing arenas filled up. The New York Liberty moved games to larger venues specifically to accommodate the demand Clark generated just by being on the visiting roster. Think about that for a moment. A visiting player was causing home teams to upsize their venues. That doesn't happen, except it did. The resale market echoed every bit of it. SeatGeek and StubHub data from that season showed Fever games consistently ranking among the highest resale velocity events in all of professional basketball. Not women's basketball, all of basketball. A $40 face value ticket regularly cleared $200 on the secondary market. Premium floor seats touched numbers that would have made NBA franchises in mid-sized markets raise an eyebrow. Corporate sponsors noticed. National broadcast partners noticed. The entire infrastructure of women's basketball started recalibrating around one player's gravitational pull. Here's what made it even more remarkable. This wasn't a finals run driving the numbers. Indiana finished that rookie season at 20 wins and 20 losses, a perfectly mediocre record by any competitive standard, and the seats were still full. Fans weren't coming because the Fever were winning championships. They were coming because watching Caitlin Clark play basketball felt like witnessing something that only comes around once in a generation. That's an extraordinarily powerful foundation to build on, which makes what came next not just disappointing, it makes it genuinely baffling. Because when you're handed that kind of cultural momentum, when fans are setting 6 a.m. alarms and booking hotel rooms to watch your .500 team play a Wednesday night game, the only move that makes sense is to build something worthy of it. What Indiana did instead is a story that deserves its own chapter. And that chapter starts with the moment the upper deck began to empty. Nobody announced it. There was no press conference, no viral moment, no single game where everything visibly fell apart. That's actually what makes this so important to understand. The shift happened quietly, in the background, one unsold upper deck row at a time. The first signs weren't dramatic. They were subtle enough that you could explain them away individually. A Tuesday night game within attendance, a resale listing sitting unsold a week out, a broadcast camera angle that held just a half second too long on a section with more empty seats than full ones. Small cracks, easy to dismiss. But cracks don't seal themselves. What the cameras started catching, and what local beat reporters began carefully documenting, without wanting to make it a headline, was a pattern. The lower bowl at Gamebridge Fieldhouse remained solid. Season ticket holders' corporate counts, the loyal core that would show up regardless of record or roster, they were there. They're always there. That's not the story. The story is the upper sections, the casual fans, the Columbus woman and her daughter who drove in last year, and this year looked at the ticket prices, looked at the parking costs, looked at the schedule, and quietly decided to watch from the couch instead. Here's a surprising insight that reframes everything. Casual fans are not disloyal. They are rational. They make cost-benefit calculations the same way anyone spends discretionary income, and when the product stops justifying the full investment of time, money, and energy, they don't storm off angrily. They just quietly stop showing up. No drama, no statement, just an empty seat where a paying customer used to be. And the product had started showing them reasons to hesitate. Not because of Clark. We will keep returning to this point because it keeps getting misread. Her individual performances remained appointment television. A 30-foot pull-up off the dribble with a hand in her face. A no-look pass through traffic that only 2 or 3 players in the world even see. Moments that make you grab the person next to you and say, "Did you just see that?" Those moments were still happening. But basketball is 11 players on the floor, not one. And what surrounded Clark during stretches of games this season exposed something that casual fans register emotionally even when they can't articulate analytically. When she rested, the offense didn't slow down. It stopped. When she came off the floor in the fourth quarter of close games, the energy in the building shifted. Not because fans were leaving, because fans were collectively tensing up. That tension is a signal no attendance metric captures. It's a feeling of a tightrope act where everyone in the audience knows there's no net below. Fans started associating Fever games with that feeling. And that association, built game by game, quarter by quarter, is far more damaging to long-term attendance than any single loss could ever be. The empty seats weren't fans abandoning Caitlin Clark. They were fans sending a message to everyone else in that building. The question is whether anyone in the front office was actually listening. Let's kill this narrative right now before it gets any more oxygen. Because the moment you start talking about empty seats and falling resale prices in the same video as Caitlin Clark's name, a certain kind of take begins forming in certain corners of the internet. The lazy, reflexive, intellectually dishonest take that treats correlation as causation and ignores every number that inconveniently contradicts the story someone already decided to tell. So here are the numbers, the actual numbers. Clark's shooting efficiency this season has remained among the elite at her position. Her three-point attempt rate, the volume at which she's pulling up from ranges that redefine what a reasonable shot even looks like in the WNBA. is operating at a level that forces opposing coaching staffs to dedicate specific defensive game planning resources just to her, not her team. Her, one player commanding an entire defensive scheme adjustment from every opponent on the schedule. Her court vision ranks at the top of the league in a category that doesn't show up on a highlight reel, but that basketball people understand immediately: the ability to make the right read before the defense has finished rotating. She's not just scoring, she's making the players around her better than they would be without her, which, given what we're about to reveal about the roster depth, is an achievement that deserves significantly more credit than it receives. As sports analyst and WNBA commentator Rebecca Lobo noted during a broadcast this season, paraphrasing her assessment, Clark does things that change the geometry of the floor itself. Defenses can't sag off her, can't help off her, can't shade her toward her weak hand the way they do with other guards, because she has no exploitable weak hand at the distances she operates from. That's not a compliment. That's a structural problem she creates for every opponent she faces. Not only is Clark performing at an individual level that justifies every ticket sold in her name, but she is actively masking how severe Indiana's supporting cast deficiencies actually are. Game over on that argument. Here is what the empty seats are genuinely not about. They are not about fans souring on Clark. They are not about the novelty of women's basketball fading. They are not evidence that the cultural surge she created was artificial or unsustainable by nature. What they are about is something far more specific and far more fixable, if the organization chooses to fix it. The WNBA's own internal data from this season show that markets with a marquee star surrounded by a credible supporting roster maintained attendance momentum into year 2 and beyond. Markets with a star carried a thin roster saw the casual fan segment, the exact demographic Clark converted from non-viewers, begin pulling back. That's not a Caitlin Clark problem. That's a roster construction problem, wearing a Caitlin Clark jersey. And the depth disaster at the heart of Indiana's current situation is so specific, so avoidable, and so damaging that when you see the full picture, you won't be surprised the seats are emptying. You'll be surprised it didn't happen sooner. Here's a question that should haunt every Indiana Fever executive who watched those resale prices crater. If you were handed the single greatest marketing asset in the history of your league, a generational talent who converted millions of non-fans into ticket buyers in less than 12 months, what is the one thing you absolutely cannot afford to do? Surround her with a roster that makes her look like she's playing 5-on-1, because that is precisely what happened. Let's get specific, because vague criticism is the easiest thing to dismiss. The Indiana Fever entered this season with a supporting cast that ranked among the thinnest in the league by virtually every measurable roster construction metric. Depth scoring, the points generated by players outside the starting unit, placed Indiana near the bottom of the WNBA. Bench efficiency, measuring how effectively non-starters maintain momentum when the starting lineup rested, told the same story in different numbers. The drop-off when Clark sits is not a perception problem. It is a documented, quantifiable, film room-confirmed collapse in offensive coherence. Here's the dual reality that exposes the full scope of this failure. Not only does Indiana's bench rank among the weakest in the league in scoring output, but the defensive personnel surrounding Clark also lacks the positional versatility that modern WNBA offenses ruthlessly exploit. 2 problems, 1 roster. The Fever are being punished on both ends of the floor the moment Clark isn't dictating the terms of engagement. Think about what that means for the fan experience. You buy a ticket. You show up. The first quarter is electric. Clark is on. The offense flows. The building has energy. Then she goes to the bench. And the next 6 minutes feel like watching a completely different team. Not a worse version of the same team. A different team. One that struggles to create clean looks, struggles to defend in space, struggles to maintain the competitive tension that keeps a casual fan emotionally invested. Those 6 minutes are costing Indiana more than any front office spreadsheet is currently measuring. A veteran WNBA scout, speaking to a league-focused outlet earlier this season without attribution, described Indiana's current roster construction as, in essence, a star vehicle without a functioning engine block. The hood looks right, the exterior draws a crowd, but when you lift it open, the supporting infrastructure isn't built to carry the weight being placed on it. That quote should be printed and framed in the Fever front office. Because here's the emerging reality of roster construction in the modern WNBA. The league is accelerating, Athleticism is up. Defensive sophistication is up. The teams winning championships and sustaining attendance aren't the ones with one transcendent talent. They're the ones who recognize that transcendent talent as an opportunity to build a complete organization around, not a substitute for building one. Las Vegas figured this out. New York figured this out. They built rosters where the star elevates an already credible supporting cast, creating a product where any 5 players on the floor can be competitive. Indiana built a spotlight, and a spotlight, no matter how bright, cannot fill a roster. The most damaging part of this isn't what it does to the win-loss record. It's what it does to the one thing Indiana cannot afford to lose right now: the trust of casual fan, who is still deciding whether women's basketball is worth their Saturday night. That fan is watching, and they're running out of reasons to keep watching past the third quarter. Imagine you're a parent of 2 in suburban Indianapolis. You watched Caitlin Clark's half-court buzzer beater clip 17 times on your phone last spring. You took your kids to a game last season, paid full price, stood in the concourse with an overpriced hot dog, and felt genuinely electric about it. You told your coworkers on Monday. You meant every word. Now it's a new season. You're looking at the schedule. And this time, you're doing the math first. 2 tickets at face value, $80 on the low end, parking downtown Indianapolis on a game night, $30 if you find something reasonable, $45 if you don't plan ahead. Concessions for a family of 4, another $60 at minimum. And that's if nobody want a jersey or a souvenir cup. Gas, babysitter if needed, dinner before or after. Suddenly you're looking at a number north of $250 for a single Wednesday night game. That is a real financial decision, not a casual one. Here's the part that sports organizations consistently underestimate. The casual fan doesn't compare a game ticket to other game tickets. They compare it to everything else competing for that same $250. A weekend trip for family dinners, a streaming subscription for 3 months, a kid's activity. The competition for discretionary spending in 2025 is not the team across town. It's every other option a family has for how to spend a limited entertainment budget. And here's the cruel math of the value equation. When the product on the floor is electric from tip-off to final buzzer, when the team is competitive, the games are close, the star delivers and the supporting cast holds up, that $250 feels like a bargain. Fans don't even think about it. They're already planning the next trip. But when 3 of the 4 quarters feel lopsided, when the team goes on a 7-minute scoring drought the moment Clark sits, when a game that was tied at halftime turns into a double-digit loss before the 4th quarter even starts, that $250 starts feeling like a lot. The mental accounting shifts. And the next time that family looks at the schedule, the bar for committing is just a little bit higher. This is how casual attendance erodes. Not in one dramatic moment. In 100 small recalculations made at kitchen tables across central Indiana. The fever situation is particularly sharp because Clark raised a baseline expectation of what attending a game should feel like. She didn't just sell tickets. She sold an experience. A specific, electrifying, once-in-a-generation experience. And every game where the surrounding product fails to match that expectation doesn't just disappoint a fan. It retroactively adjusts their memory of what they're actually buying. $12 resale tickets aren't fans saying Caitlin Clark isn't worth watching. They're fans saying the full package isn't currently worth $250 of a family budget. That is a completely different problem with a completely different solution. And the organizations that understand that distinction are the ones currently selling out while Indiana watches rows go dark. What did those organizations actually do differently? Because the blueprint exists. It's being executed right now in other WNBA cities. And the contrast between those franchises and Indiana isn't subtle. It's the difference between building an empire and renting a spotlight. There's a moment in franchise building that separates the organizations that sustain success from the ones that accidentally stumble into it. It's not the draft pick. It's not the star signing. It's the decision made in the front office the morning after the star arrives. The question of whether this talent is a destination or the foundation. The franchises thriving in the WNBA right now answer that question correctly. Look at the Las Vegas Aces during their championship run. Aya Wilson is their Caitlin Clark, a generational talent, a defensive nightmare for every opponent, a player who commands the attention of every coaching staff in the league the moment she steps on the floor. But Las Vegas didn't hand Wilson a roster and call it a day. They built outward from her. Kelsey Plum, Jackie Young, Chelsea Gray before her departure. Each piece specifically selected to complement Wilson's dominance, rather than simply exist alongside it. The result wasn't just championships. It was a product where if Wilson had an off night, which almost never happened, but hypothetically, the team could still win. The casual fan attending a Las Vegas game never experienced that 6-minute offensive drought that makes you check your phone and recalculate the parking cost. That security is what keeps seats filled. New York built a similar architecture around Breanna Stewart. The Liberty didn't treat Stewart's arrival as a marketing moment. They treated it as a structural mandate. Every roster decision after she arrived was evaluated through one lens. Does this make the team harder to beat when Stewart is on the floor and functional when she isn't? The answer showed up in their attendance figures and their playoff results simultaneously. Here's a surprising insight that reframes the entire conversation. The teams sustaining attendance growth into year 2 and beyond aren't necessarily the ones with the biggest star. They're the ones where the star's presence made the team demonstrably better at a roster level, where buying a ticket means watching a system work, not watching one player hold a system together through sheer individual will. That distinction matters enormously to the casual fan's subconscious experience of watching a game. And here's the emerging trend that should terrify Indiana's front office right now. The WNBA is entering a period of accelerating roster sophistication. Teams are investing more heavily in international scouting, developing deeper benches, and prioritizing positional versatility in ways the league hasn't historically demanded. The gap between well-constructed rosters and thin ones is widening every single season. What that means practically is this: the window for Indiana to course correct isn't indefinitely open. Every season they delay building a legitimate supporting cast around Clark is a season where other franchises are pulling further ahead in roster quality, and where the casual fan base Clark converted is slowly reevaluating their investment. The blueprint for what success looks like exists. It's been executed. It's been proven. Other cities are living it right now, which makes Indiana's current situation not a mystery. It's a choice, a series of specific front office choices that created exactly the product currently failing to fill the upper deck. And those choices have names, faces, and draft night timestamps attached to them. Draft night tells you everything about what an organization actually believes, not what they say in press conferences, not what the general manager outlines in the season preview interview, but what they genuinely prioritize when the lights are on and the clock is running. So let's talk about Indiana's draft nights since Clark arrived. Here's a story that illustrates exactly how organizational philosophy becomes roster reality. In the months following Clark's historic rookie season, after the record attendance, after the national broadcast numbers, after every metric that measures cultural impact screamed that something genuinely unprecedented was happening in Indianapolis, the Fever faced a critical off-season construction moment. The question wasn't complicated. How do you build a roster that converts a one-year cultural surge into a sustainable competitive product? The answer required aggressive, targeted roster building, not just adding bodies. Adding specific bodies, wings who could defend in space, a backup ball handler who could maintain offensive coherence during Clark's rest minutes, a front court presence that could generate second chance opportunities, and ease the scoring burden on a single player being asked to do everything simultaneously. What Indiana did instead revealed a front office still operating on a pre-Clark organizational philosophy in a post-Clark organizational reality. The personnel decisions prioritized development potential over immediate impact at exactly the moment immediate impact was required. Young players with theoretical upside were slotted into roles demanding proven reliability, roster spots that should have housed veteran contributors, players who understood how to function within a system rather than learn one on the fly. When a developmental piece is better suited for a rebuilding team than a franchise sitting on the most valuable marketing asset in women's sports history. Bold advice for any front office in this situation. When your attendance jumped by 40% on the back of one player's arrival, you are no longer a rebuilding team. You do not get to operate with a rebuilding team's patience for developmental timelines. The moment Clark walked through that door, Indiana's organizational mandate changed fundamentally. The front office either didn't understand that or chose not to act on it. Both possibilities are equally damaging, and the players who suffered most visibly from these decisions aren't the ones who failed to develop fast enough. The player absorbing the full weight of an underconstructed roster is the one whose name is on the marquee outside the building. Consider what Clark has been asked to carry. Not just scoring, not just playmaking, but maintaining fan engagement, driving media attention, and sustaining the commercial momentum of an entire franchise, all while operating a system that structurally guarantees she will be isolated and overloaded in the game's most critical moments. That is not a basketball operation. That is one player doing the job of a front office. The most damaging front office mistake isn't any single draft pick or free agency decision. It's the cumulative signal those decisions send to the one person the entire operation depends on. Players know when they're being supported. They know when the organization around them is building something real versus managing a situation. And if Caitlin Clark eventually looks around at what's been built beside her and decides that her next chapter belongs somewhere else, that empty upper deck will look like the good old days. Here's something nobody in this conversation wants to say out loud, because pessimism gets more clicks than possibility. Indiana can fix this. Not eventually, not theoretically, not in some distant organizational rebuild that conveniently arrives after Clark's prime years have already passed. The structural problems exposed by the empty seats and the $12 resale tickets are real, but they are not irreversible. And understanding exactly what a turnaround requires is more valuable than cataloging what went wrong. Because one of those conversations moves something forward, and one of them just makes noise. So let's move something forward. Here's the unexpected twist on everything we've established so far. The very thing that makes Indiana's situation alarming is also the thing that makes it uniquely fixable. Most franchises spend a decade trying to manufacture what the Fever already have. A generational talent at the peak of her powers, a nationally engaged fan base primed for reconversion, and a market that proved beyond any reasonable doubt it will respond explosively to a compelling product. The demand didn't disappear. It went dormant. Those are completely different problems with completely different solutions. Dormant demand reactivates faster than new demand gets created. The Columbus woman who drove 4 hours last season and stayed home this season isn't gone. She's waiting. Not consciously, not with a list of demands, but somewhere in the back of her mind, she's still checking scores, still watching Clark highlights when they land in her feed, still half considering a trip if the right game presents itself at the right moment. That is an asset most franchises would trade their entire draft board to possess. The practical path forward isn't complicated to identify, even if it requires genuine organizational will to execute. Indiana needs one proven, versatile wing defender capable of switching assignments and maintaining defensive integrity during Clark's rest minutes. They need one reliable secondary ball handler. Not a star, not a featured scorer, just a competent floor general who can run a half-court set without the offense dissolving into isolation attempts. And they need a front-court presence who can rebound at a rate that gives the team second possessions. Because second possessions are where thin rosters bleed out in close games. 3 targeted additions, not a teardown, not a rebuild. 3 specific pieces that transform a one-player operation into a functioning team. The difference that makes in the fan experience is disproportionate to how modest those additions actually sound. Because what those 3 players provide isn't just basketball utility. They provide something the casual fan feels without being able to name it. Confidence. The sense that when Clark goes to the bench, the game doesn't stop. That the lead is safe, that the investment is protected. Confidence is what fills upper decks. And here's what gives genuine reason for optimism beneath all the organizational criticism. Clark herself hasn't wavered. She hasn't gone quiet. She hasn't let the thin roster become an excuse for diminished effort or disengaged body language. Anyone watching her closely this season has seen a player pushing harder in precisely the moments when the surrounding cast gives her every reason to coast. That competitive character is contagious when it has enough talent around it to spread. The Fever front office has one genuine window to get this right, while the foundation Clark built still exists beneath the surface. The question isn't whether Indiana can turn this around. The question is whether the people making the decisions have finally felt enough of the empty seats to understand what filling them actually requires. What does an empty seat actually say? Not the empty seat at a struggling franchise nobody is watching. Not the empty seat at a Tuesday night game between two rebuilding rosters playing out the string in late August. The empty seat at a Caitlin Clark game. In the building where the hottest ticket in women's sports history was selling for $200 14 months ago and $12 last week. That empty seat is not apathy. Apathy doesn't leave a message. Apathy just disappears quietly and never comes back. This is something else entirely. This is a fan base that showed up in historic numbers, felt something real, invested emotionally and financially in what they believed was the beginning of something, and then watched the organization around that belief fail to honor it. The empty seat isn't abandonment. It's a statement. Fans are not leaving Caitlin Clark. They are leaving an incomplete product and waiting, with varying degrees of patience, for someone in Indianapolis to notice. The question is whether anyone is reading the message correctly. Because here's what the full picture reveals when you pull back far enough to see all of it simultaneously. The surge was real and it was earned. The cracks appeared not because momentum fades naturally, but because thin rosters accelerate the fading. The cost equation shifted not because fans became less committed, but because the value proposition stopped justifying the full investment. The front office choices that built this roster gap were specific, documented, and avoidable. And the path back, while demanding genuine organizational will, is far clearer than the people currently occupying those front office seats appear to recognize. Three things matter most coming out of this conversation. Clark's individual performance has never been a variable in this equation. It has been the constant, the anchor, the one element functioning exactly as promised, while everything around it struggled to keep pace. The casual fan exodus from the upper deck is a market signal, not a cultural retreat. Dormant demand reactivates faster than new demand gets built, and Indiana still has more raw material to work with than most franchises dream of possessing. And the window for getting this right is real, but it is not unlimited. Every season of organizational hesitation is a season where Clark's prime years pass, and with a fan base she converted slowly recalibrates their relationship with the product. The empty seats are not the end of the story. They are a chapter break, the moment in the narrative where the organization either recognizes what it has and builds something worthy of it, or continues making the mistake of assuming that one transcendent talent is a substitute for the hard, unglamorous roster construction work that sustainable success actually requires. Caitlin Clark did her part. She did more than her part. She rewrote the economic and cultural architecture of women's basketball in a single rookie season, and then came back and kept performing while a thin roster asked her to carry weight no single player should carry alone. What happens next belongs entirely to the people whose names aren't on the back of a jersey. The seats are empty. The message is loud. And somewhere in the front office in Indianapolis, the right decision is waiting to be made. The only question left worth asking is a simple one. Are they listening? This video is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It is not professional sports, financial, or legal advice. All roster assessments, attendance figures, and market analyses are based on publicly available information and commentary. Always consult qualified experts before making any decisions.